Uh, Hello everyone. Do you have this slide? So, I want you to imagine something. Imagine that you had a child, a 16-year-old child, working as a bus conductor. And picture this, a 16-year-old boy working as a conductor, bare-chested, with his shirt around his waist, and clinging onto a downfall bus and shouting, "Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow!" And then that boy is just a misstep away from falling and getting crushed by a trailer. Did that make you cringe? Because if it did, then I'm going to tell you another story. And I'm going to tell you the story of flowers. But before I do that, my topic for today is finding greatness in the most unlikely places. And yesterday I was thinking about what I wanted to share because I have a lot of stories to tell. I've lived a very full life, and I've had a lot of phenomenal experiences with the work I do. So I just thought, let me talk about how we're doing great things, from the most unlikely places. So my name is Tunde Onakoya, and this is how I describe myself. I mean, the bio read something entirely different from what I wrote here, but I'll show you what I wrote here. Next slide, please. So I wrote full-time chess teacher and part-time area boy. My journey to becoming a chess teacher and transitioning to an area boy at some point started some 15 years ago. So I grew up in Ikorodu, in a slum community called Isalodo. And after my primary school education, I couldn't go to school for a number of years. And I was always at home. I was doing nothing. And one of those days, I decided to go play video games at a barber shop. And on that day, the barber brought out a small plastic chess set. And I saw a chessboard for the first time in my life. And I was curious because I'd never seen something like that before. I was fascinated by the way the chess pieces were carved. And I wanted to know more about this game. Because for me, it was just love at first sight. And I asked him to teach me, and he said, no, that he can't teach me, that I was a small boy, and it was too complex for me to understand. So I kept watching them. And with time, I was able to pick up the rules of the game, and I learned how to play the pieces on the board. And I eventually got into school. Unfortunately, the school I attended actually taught chess as a subject, so we wrote examinations at the end of every term. So I became really good. Now remember, I grew up in the slums of Ikorodu, and we grew up in poverty, but then it's not poverty in the sense of what a lot of us understand. It's poverty that was deeply rooted in not even having access, being exposed to a world beyond the confines of your community. So chess was important for me. It was important that I learned how to play chess at that stage in my life because it took me places. I went to the island for the first time because I went to play a chess tournament. And for a little boy from the slums of Ikorodu, that changed everything for me. I had a different perception about life, about people, and about places. And I won a tournament in GSS2. And on that day that I took this trophy home, and I showed my dad that I won something from chess, I saw my dad cry for the first time. He was proud of his son. But for me, it did something for me, right? It made me believe that I could become anything that I wanted in the world. And I believed this very intimately. I became intimate with the idea of who I could become. So because of that, I started seeing myself as different from the other boys that we grew up together in the hood. And I went into secondary school, I went into college, I went to school on scholarship because I was on the college chess team. I won the RCCG National Chess Championship twice. And I won a lot of tournaments, and I was ranked one of the best chess players in Nigeria. And that wasn't even the beginning of my story. 5 years ago, I made a decision to take that talent that I had and take it back to other children like me that live in the slums and give it to them as a gift. Because I knew that for chess, to me as a talent, was only going to be useful for my own personal career ambitions. But then I saw an opportunity to share this gift with other children like me who would never get to know what they could truly become. And Africa is in such a bad place right now, and the world doesn't respect us as a continent. As a matter of fact, the city of New York, the GDP is a lot more than the entire Africa as a continent's GDP. So what that means is, if someone had an option to milk the entire New York or Africa, they will milk Africa without thinking twice. Because we don't just offer as much value as a city in the US. And that is very disturbing, right? But then, that's the harsh reality of the world that we live in. And a simple cost-benefit analysis, and you know that, man, Africa doesn't have much to offer, so just milk it. But listen, that is not the single story. There's another story of potential that we always talk about for the longest time. Everyone says Africa has potential, the young people in Africa here have this incredible potential. But potential is nothing if it's not realized. And this is what I saw. I saw an opportunity to help children realize their potential, because I didn't just want us to focus on the single story of poverty that had been propagated for so long. I wanted the world to see that these children had the ability to do something. And I believe that we should all be judged based on that premise. Not because of what we look like or where you're from or who you are, but because of the things you have the ability to do. And I thought about what I could do, and it was chess. And I took a couple of chess belts, and I went to a slum community in Majido, and I started teaching children there that were not in school. And that was how that journey started. And in that journey, I met a lot of incredibly gifted children that were living in multidimensional poverty. And one of those kids was, next slide, Fawaz Adere. I don't know if it's clear enough, but the description I put here is ex-street kid and living under Oshodi Bridge. Now, I met Fawaz November last year. So I had this crazy idea. And the mindset behind even creating the Chess and Songs project was because I thought I had an idea that could shape the future. I thought I had an idea that could help us tell a different story that wasn't just a single story. And I just kept doing it from 2018 to 2019 to 2020, and nobody really saw it. But last year, September, we wanted to scale our project to more communities, and we decided, where's the craziest place we could go to that this could be the most impactful? Let's go to Oshodi Bridge. And for those that don't live in Lagos, Oshodi Bridge is a den for cultists and area boys. When you think about the ghetto, it's as bad as it gets. People have been killed there for nothing. People get robbed every now and then. And we decided that we wanted to go to that same place and teach the area boys how to play chess. But we were not there for the area boys. We were there for the children that were going to someday become area boys. And the only way I understood this on a personal note was when I was driving past that place sometime in July, and a little kid just walked up to my car and started begging for money. And I didn't have any money to give him, so I just looked away. I was trying to maintain eye contact with him. And he just kept begging, Eventually the traffic cleared, and I just moved on, and he just went into the next car. But I couldn't stop thinking about that child. Then the following week, another incident happened. I was driving to Korodu, and this group of 4 guys just came with knives and stones, thugs, area boys, and they started banging at my car window. I tried to stay calm, and they were just willing to harm me, without thinking twice about it. And I just turned on my pointer, and I kept running, and they just broke the side mirror and just left. And when I got home, I wanted to type on Twitter that, man, Nigeria, such a wayward country, this was what happened to me. But I thought about it. I thought about that process, I thought about the incident that happened the previous week. Those children that we neglect as a society, that we didn't pay attention to, they evolved, and at some point they lost their innocence and they became area boys. Now we complain about the problems, but we don't think about the effect, about the process. And I just deleted what I was typing. And I started reading about area boys. I started watching videos. And I told my team that, you know what, let's do this project for these children there, so we can find the cause. Where is that breaking point where these children evolve into innocent kids and become hardened criminals on the streets? I went to Oshodi and I met Fawaz and 50 other kids. And I remember our first class, the first thing I told them was, listen, you're here to play chess. And the beauty of chess is that after the first 4 moves, you have more than 120 raised to power 120 billion, trillion, zillion ways, to play that game. So the number of possibilities in the game of chess is more than the number of atoms in the universe. But with all of these plethora of opportunities, options that you have, you can only make one move. And I told them that you're all here because someone made a move at some point, maybe your parents, maybe you did, that was the wrong move. And this time, I'm going to teach you how to play chess so you can learn to make the right moves. Because everything you do from now henceforth matters. And this is how you rewrite your story on the 64 squares. I said it to Yoruba anyway, but for the first time, I saw the children listen and they paid attention. And remember, we're working with street kids, ardent children, criminals that have been through very terrible things. But on that day, one of the most notorious slums, ghettos in Lagos, became a classroom for street kids to sit down and learn. And that was the beginning of a much beautiful story that would continue to unfold with time. And I met Fawaz on that day. Now listen, Fawaz grew up in Ibadan. And he dropped out of school when he was in JSS2 because somebody called him an Olodo. And he just thought, well, I was failing at school, let me just, go out there and also. And he came to Lagos at the age of 10. And he has spent 8 years under that bridge, just living as a conductor, hustling and all of that. 8 years of his life. And he came to me and told me that this chess, he wanted to learn it, but then he doesn't have food. I should give him money for food. And I told him that I wasn't going to give him free money, but I was going to ask him a question. And if he could get it, I'll give him money to go and buy food. And he got it. And when I gave him the 200 naira, I said, Mumalo, better to work. And he seemed very excited. So he kept coming every day. And we saw these children every day for the next 1 month. And at the end of that period, we organized a tournament for them. And Fawaz won the tournament. And it became a beautiful story. Now, remember that Oshodi on that bridge already had that preconceived stereotype that everybody there is a good-for-nothing area boy that has nothing to offer to society. And truly, a lot of children that have found their way to such a dangerous and terrible place are falling through the cracks of society. They don't fit into the educational system. Most of them are orphans. Most of them cannot even stay at home because they are too rebellious. So how do you reimagine education in a way that includes people like this? Fawaz won a chess tournament. He didn't just win the chess tournament, he won the mental maths tournament. And we realized that he was a genius. An underbridge strip kid was a genius. But no one would have known if we didn't take a chance on them. If we didn't decide to search for greatness in unlikely places. And that's the story of Fawaz. That's the beginning of the story. But I'll tell you another story. Next slide. Story of Ferdinand. Ferdinand Maumo was a boy I met last year, April, in Makoko. Now, for those that don't live in Lagos, Makoko is the largest floating slum in the world. And we went there to do the Chelsea Slums project. And Ferdinand was one of the kids that I met on that day. And this boy has a medical condition called cerebral palsy. And you see that in my description there, I wrote a differently able child living with cerebral palsy. Now, cerebral palsy is a very terrible medical condition. It's brain damage, which limits, muscle movements and everything else. And Ferdinand had cerebral palsy. And on the day that we selected children we wanted to work with, they didn't let him come into the center because he's, they blame the community. They call him Golugo. Golugo means dummy in Igbo. And they wouldn't let him come in because no one could imagine that he would learn a game as complex as chess. Because chess is a very complex game, which requires the use of even more complex terminologies to explain certain concepts. So how do you explain to a child who has never been to school before, who doesn't speak, who has brain damage, that a root moves vertically and horizontally? How do you explain that to a child who doesn't even speak or listen to the same language that you speak? But on that day, I saw him just outside, and I told him to come in, and he was crying because they had bullied him again. And whenever that happened, he would go home and go and cry to his mom. And we put him in a classroom. And one of those days, our project manager walked up to me and started crying. I said, "What happened?" He said, come and see. And I went to Ferdinand's table, and I saw him beating everybody in his class. And we were amazed by this little boy who had such a frail body, but he has the greatest spirit that I had ever seen. And for the first time, I saw him smile because he had found something he was really good at. And we kept teaching them. And after a while, we organized the tournament. And on that day, we made suits for them like this, for every child in Makoko. Because we wanted to change the perception about children in slum communities. Because when you close your eyes and you imagine this mental image of a child in poverty, what comes to mind is not a pleasant picture of a child that is well suited up and looking dapper. You think about a child with kwashoko or the looks unhealthy or plastic clothes. We wanted to change the perception to say, listen, poverty is real, it's true, but there's another story that we're neglecting, which is the story of becoming. And we made suits for Ferdinand and all the other children we trained. And on the day of the tournament, Ferdinand won. He emerged as champion, and the story went viral. And the governor called me and said, "I saw this boy online. Can you lead him to my office? I would like to play chess with him." And I took him to the governor's office. And they played. And the game lasted for about an hour. But they didn't draw. But the boy was winning. But don't tell anyone that. Now listen, that changed his life. The governor was moved to tears. And he walked into his room and gave him $1 million cash. And took up his education and the education of all his other siblings. And his life changed from that day. Now, Ferdinand is a chess genius. He's still playing chess and he's in school, and all his other siblings are getting an education. We met him in the slums of Makoko, the largest floating slum in the world. The most unlikely place in which you'd ever imagine that greatness could emerge from. Next slide. The greatest miracle of chess is in that innate ability of a pawn to become a coin. And for those that don't play chess, the pawn is the least valuable piece on a chessboard, while the coin is the most valuable piece on a chessboard. So there's a transition process from when the pawn matches square by square. When it gets to the end of the board, it undergoes what we call pawn promotion. And in that moment, the pawn becomes the coin, the most powerful piece on the board. The coin is very powerful, just like our women. They're very powerful, and they know it, but they're pretending like they don't know it. But in chess, the coin is powerful, and it's not up for debate. And when that pawn becomes a queen, it exerts so much power and influence on the chessboard that you're more likely to win again when you're able to promote your pawn to become a queen. And this analogy deeply reflects the essence of what we do at Chelsea Slums. To help every child know that they can truly become powerful. That the story that defines them is not the story of poverty, but the story of what they actually have the ability to be. And this is why the story of Fawaz and the story of Ferdinand resonates very strongly with a lot of people. It has inspired me so much to know that it is indeed possible for great things to emerge from small places. Next slide, please. Now, that is a picture of Fawaz now. I don't know if you guys can see it clearly, but that's him wearing a suit for an organization. So he was signed as a model. And also the other Bridge Street kid was signed as a model for an organization. And that is him playing chess. He was wearing a suit. And you can see the contrast between this picture and the picture that I showed earlier. The next one, please. That's Ferdinand, the chess champion in Makoko, wearing a suit and holding up a trophy. And he's playing chess now. And just recently, Netflix reached out to us and they were making a movie about him. Next slide, please. And that's the story of Ferdinand and his mom. And that's another picture of Ferdinand there. With a full body, he has a great spirit and a sound mind. And how do we really think about doing great things from a small place? How do we think about greatness, even in places that people don't pay attention to? And this is the essence of what we do. Because just like Fawaz and Ferdinand, there's several children, millions of children that have been trapped in that cycle of poverty. And it's our responsibility to make sure that we look at them and find the things that they have the ability to do. And give them an opportunity to find expression. So that the story of poverty doesn't just become their only story, that single story. That when people see that, oh, this happened and these children are suffering, because when they say Nigerians are in multidimensional poverty and there are 100 million Nigerians in multidimensional poverty, we forget that these are actual people, and the ones that bear the most brunt of this are the children, the ones that became a victim of their parents' poverty. And because of this, I'm very much committed to helping every child discover the things that they have the ability to do, and giving them a way to express themselves through chess. And chess is not the end in itself. It is a means to several ends. And Fawaz's story and Ferdinand's story are very inspiring. And also begs the question to how even we can find greatness in the most unlikely places. To not find ourselves from where we've come from, even as Africans or as Black people, to understand that the things that we do, that they matter and they can contribute value to the world. And the moment you begin to see that the things that you do matter in your own little space, then you begin to live your life as if everything is a miracle. Because honestly, your life is a miracle. And it doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter if you are from Ogbomoso, you are from Ede, or you are from Ejigbo. That you know that even in the most unlikely places, greatness can emerge from within you that can impact the world in very meaningful ways. And I tell you that someday the spotlight will be on you and you get a chance to prove your mettle and show the world what you're made of. And in that moment, when everything aligns for you, then you truly understand that there are truly decades when nothing happens. And there are weeks when decades happen. And when that happens, you believe and you understand that truly it is possible to do great things from a small place. Thank you very much.
Thank you so